Good morning and welcome to EDBEAT. This is Patrick Brendel from the Cayman Current. And if you guys, viewers may notice, April is not on the screen right now, but April Cummings of Cayman Life TV, I assure you, is around. And so I hope that she'll be able to come in and join us this morning during our conversation. This week we are being joined by Dr. Byron Coon, who is the president of the International College of the Cayman Islands. And he's been at ICCI since 2018. And we also have Tom Simpson, who is a former board member of University College of the Cayman Islands. And he's also been a board member at the University of Toronto. And while he was on the board of UCCI, he was on the presidential search committee that resulted in the hiring of Stacey McAfee as president and CEO. And he's also been involved in the hiring process for the leader of University of Toronto. So today we're talking about a topic that is timely and important. It's the impending departure of UCCI President McAfee. And we're going to start the conversation by talking about the process that goes into recruiting and hiring a university leader. And in general, how the leader of a university sets the tone for that institution. So really what the choice of the new leader of UCCI, what that will say about the future of the university. And I guess just to put this in context, as I think we all know, UCCI is in the middle of its 5-year overall strategic plan. The recruitment and hiring of Dr. McAfee coincided with the finalization and the execution of this 5-year plan. And her initial contract was a 3-year contract with kind of in the middle of at the end of 3 years, the opportunity to review, and then with the option to renew that contract for another 3 years, which was really set to coincide with this 5-year plan. So Tom, we'll start with you. I guess, what are your overall thoughts on the situation UCCI is in right now?
Well, as you said, the recruitment of Dr. McAfee followed a process by the board to decide what the direction of UCCI would be following the retirement of President Roy Gladden. He had taken the university to a stage where it was financially stable again. And then the question was, where are we going from there? And he and the existing faculty and staff came up with a draft strategic plan. And out of that comes a job description for the new president. You need to match the person to what the university wants to do. And in fact, Dr. McAfee participated in the last stage of that and put her final stamp on the plan. And so it was her plan as well once she came on board. So the issue now is what does this mean? Was Dr. McAfee unable to execute that plan for some reason? Or does it mean that the university's lost faith in that plan and needs to rethink the plan before it goes out, decides what new leader it needs to run a new plan or new course of action? And that's what we don't know right now.
And I guess according to some documents that you shared with me that are the public records from the UCCI board meetings, you shared with me a timeline of the hiring process last time around. And one obvious thing I noticed is it took a year or even more than a year from the time that the decision was made to formulate this process and then actually having the new president installed. Do you think that's a typical timeline we'll be looking for? Is that typical?
Yes. Well, there's two parts to it. One is there's a hiring season for academics. And if you want to get the best candidates, you want to be having the job description during the hiring season because of the school cycle. So that determined part of it. But the other thing is universities are very political places. The word consultation is a very important thing. So a lot of the timeline was not only getting a strategic plan out, getting the job description out, but consulting about that, getting people, the faculty, the public. I remember when you were editor at Compass, I actually came and visited with you and presented the job description. And the result of all of that was hopefully buy-in in the direction the university was going and the kind of leader it needed. And so that was a good part of the front part. And then the process, because it was a global process, there's time, you need time to advertise it. And then UCCI last time around had over 200 applications, about 50 of which met the basic job qualification. And then out of that, we selected 11 people to actually interview. And then out of that, we selected a short list of people to bring on campus. That took time. They had to come and meet the faculty, meet see the facility. Result of that, 2 of those candidates declined. And then we had to work through the process negotiating with the remaining candidates to actually land one. That revolves a lot around the compensation package and the other terms of employment. So, and then you got to take all that through the process of getting the minister to agree, getting the board to agree, and it all just takes time, especially when you're working through the summer, which is what we ended up with last time.
And Dr. Coon, you've been on the other side of this process, being the person recruited and hired. And I believe before you were at ICCI, you were in Illinois, and so you like Dr. McAfee were in the United States, kind of an overseas candidate from here. And I'll just note that Dr. Coon is joining us from Georgia right now. So if it looks any different there than Cayman, that's the reason why. So Dr. Coon, what can you tell me about the process that you were involved in that ended up with you landing at ICCI?
Well, I think Tom has hit all the most important areas when it comes to selecting a president. Number one, I think this is what I did is that I looked at the mission of the college. Where was the college, the history of the college, et cetera, so forth, because it's very important that I think the person understand, as much as they can about the place where they're endeavoring to go. And I think that now would be an important time for 3 things that he mentioned for any candidate to look at. Number one is the mission of the college. Does it stay the same? Does it change? Is it altered? Is it headed in the right direction? Does it remain going in the same direction? Also, I think a huge part, especially in a public institution, if you will, a government-supported higher educational institution, is what parts do the constituents play? The public at large, the faculty, where do they fit into the hiring process, because they're going to be working for this person. So I think it's important to get that buy-in as well. And I think you bring your experience to the table as a candidate, and I think that you especially understand the strategy. You have to understand institutional data. You have to understand how do you even step onto new soil, if you will, because I was at the University of Florida for many, many years. I retired from there, and then I went to Chicago. And then from Chicago, I thought I was retiring for good. And then I ended up coming to the Cayman Islands. And it was probably one of the best things I ever did, because ICCI has a way of in the Cayman Islands as a whole, getting under your skin. And it just kind of, becomes a part of your life quickly. And so I did my due diligence as far as understanding the history of the college, understanding how the college got to where it was at, and trying to get a better grasp on what is it that in this new culture that I would be coming in, how can my expertise, help the college to get to where they want to go. And so this is, I think, it's really important, as Tom said, is that to understand where the college is at this time, what direction it's headed in, Now is the time that if you really wanted to make a change or a difference, in the job description, now is the time to do that. Excuse me. And also the part that the constituents would play. Because here in the Cayman Islands, um, uh, it's everything that I brought to the table with my skills. And there's a we teach in college, especially in the School of Business, that there are like 3 or 4 main leadership styles. The transactional, transformational. And then, but really, what I've learned through my many years being in higher ed is that there's as many leadership styles as there are leaders. And so I think it's important that the candidate understands, well, my chemistry and who I am fit in, with the process itself, and I do believe that I think, regardless, I think of how good a board of trustees and board of directors may feel about a person, I don't know that the board is really ever ready to go through this system again. I think because everything is going smoothly or whatever, and everything is looking good, and all of a sudden, we have a transition again, and so I think these are some of the important areas that boards may wrestle with through the hiring process, of a candidate. So I just wish them the very best.
Yeah, and I think it's important. What both of you have mentioned is, once you get past the on paper qualifications, say you get 200 interested people last time, 50 meet the qualifications. It really comes down to personality and vision, and this the right person for the right position. And at the Compass and elsewhere in the United States, one of the things that I like the best that I've got to do in my career, but also is the hardest thing to do, is to hire. And I've always felt that hiring is the most important thing that an organization can do. And but I haven't had the privilege or the curse of having to hire somebody who is going to be in charge of scores, hundreds of people, and have thousands of young people's futures kind of in their hands. So this is a really high, and I can't stress, it's like a high level executive position that now needs to be filled. So I guess coming at it from this, you're bringing in somebody who's a leader. What have you found? What do you think are kind of the pros and the cons that an applicant may see when they look at the Cayman Islands, they look at UCCI, and they kind of look generally at the state of higher education in Cayman? And either one of you can take this one.
Sure. Before we move on to the next topic, could I just say there was one more thing, the search process, that's a little different here. When we started the search process the last time, and we announced an international search and so on, there's a large number of people that see UCCI as part of the cultural, like a cultural institution on the island, and believe that it should be run by Canadian. And so there's a large part of the consultation process is try to say, okay, is this a time for a Canadian to run this institution, or do we need an international search? And so we had to go through that. And even as we were going through it, that was always on people's minds. Is there a Canadian able to take this position? So that's going to be one of the issues that crops up again at this time. We worked through last time, but it's going to affect what the board decides to do.
Right, and
go ahead.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was just going to add, piggyback on that. Tom brought up a really very important area for this search. Is that a lot of universities from the past 10, maybe 15 years, but especially in the past 10 years, a lot of universities globally have really move toward hiring people who really doesn't have that much higher ed experience. Because when you start looking at the university as a whole, it's all about, can you run something financially? Are you fiscally responsible and stuff? And they have found, because the other people that you have in the positions, such as your deans and your vice presidents and your program chairs and et cetera, they come from the background of School of Education, and they're delved into that really well, or should be, and they understand that role. And so oftentimes quite a few universities are bringing people outside of higher ed who have the expert and the wisdom, if you will, and the skills of how to run a large operation, such as, and I consider UCCI in the context of the Cayman Islands, a large college, So I do believe that that search committees really ought to stop and not just say, wow, they don't have higher ed experience, and I'm sure that they have, but a lot of colleges are bringing in people with expertise outside of higher ed, that they have taken organizations as a whole, and they've gone from, the book that was written many years ago, going from good to great. They've done really good things with organizations. And so I think that's important. And also what we are, every time we hire at ICCI, we have to look at, at Caymanians first. And I think that's important. I think understanding the culture and understanding the people, I think it's extremely important. So I think Tom is hitting the nail on the head right there.
And that comes up to back to your question, Patrick, that
yes.
A search committee is going to need to be prepared to answer a couple of questions. We talked about whether there's a shift in strategy indicated by Dr. McAfee leading before planned completion of the plan. But the other thing is the funding of that plan. When I first came on the board of UCCI, I had lunch with President Roy Bodden and asked him, what's the number one thing you'd like to see happen in the years ahead? And he said, U.S. accreditation, U.S. regional accreditation, so that UCCI degrees were recognized by U.S. and other universities, and the credits would be easily transferred and so on. That became the basis for the strategic plan, because instead of starting with a blank piece of paper, what does UCCI want to do? You just get the regional book. Here's all the stuff you need to do to improve quality. Here are the benchmarks, the test. And so that was the basis for it. And it's in the job description that we put out that resulted in Dr. McAfee. But here we are 3 years later, and there hasn't been the increased government funding that's necessary to seek U.S. accreditation. It's simply the amount of money provided by government the university won't be able to execute that plan. In fact, one of the candidates that in our short list, that was the reason he gave why he dropped out. He said, you can't do it with the money you have. They probably need twice as much as you're getting. So, he was in his 60s. He says, I'm not going to be around long enough, right? So that was it. So that'll be a question for any candidate. Is the government prepared to put up the money needed to execute this plan? And if not, what's the new plan to work with the constrained resources? On the other hand, maybe what this university now needs is a Caymanian in charge that has the ERA cabinet, so that they can approve the kind of increases that the high schools have been getting, the UCCI hasn't been getting.
Yeah, and I think in my experience in the United States, I was in Texas before, and one of my areas of coverage were the universities and the several university systems there. And I'll tell you, the presidents and leaders of these major public universities are the best fundraisers and salespeople I have ever seen in my entire life. People who can work a room and just get $1 million in checks just handed to them from alumni, and then negotiate skillfully with their own board of trustees or governors, and then appear before the legislature and just really sell that institution. So whether the new person coming in as a companion or somebody from overseas, I think really one of the most important things they can do is to be finding those funds, whether it's from the parliament or from the private sector here. So I guess there are some reasons.
But Dr. McAfee was very successful on that front, raising. I speak from personal experience.
Yes.
But in all universities, those sorts of donations are the extras that produce the extra quality, the other facilities that the public purse isn't prepared to fund. So she's successful building out that side of increased resources, but it needs the foundation of solid government funding that other public universities have in other parts of the world, and this university doesn't have that. It took the money into the primary schools, the public schools at international levels, but UCCI is not funded at the same level as other public institutions in other jurisdictions.
And I think also with the accreditation funding is that I believe going forward it's only going to become more expensive. And I think what a lot of the accrediting bodies are wrestling with, especially regionals, is that they're finding it that they were not being competitive. So a lot of those have started going outside of their regions to find universities that they will accredit. And also another one of the areas is they believe that if you're a smaller institution, that you pay the same fees, if you will, for accreditation and do the same amount of work as a very large institution. So I think some of the accrediting bodies are wrestling with, how can they work with a university of any size and say, okay, we're demanding them because they're under CHIA and higher ed and et cetera, so forth. And how can we hold their feet to the fire and yet not exhaust their finances to be able to afford accreditation? Because it's one thing getting it. It's expensive. I've been through about 4 of them. And the hardest one that I did was a school of psychology. And it was both clinical and it was both theoretical. And I was just amazed, and it's the first time I had been through a medical type accreditation, and it was pretty rough. And I understand why it was expensive, but to initially get the accreditation is expensive, but then to keep it is also very expensive. And so and plus also what different organizations wrestle with is, as far as the academic institution is, how much can we do on a free hand that actually coincides with staying within the perimeters of what the accreditation will allow? Because accreditation tells the institution what they can do and can't do, And so when you're a state funded, and there's hundreds and hundreds of colleges that have the accreditation, but it's what you would like to do and what you can do, So it's but it's very important to have the accreditation. It really is, for your students moving on, to other universities and so forth.
So Dr. Coon, you're sitting over there in ICCI, well, virtually right now. But when you look at this position open up at UCCI, what do you think? What's attractive about the position, and where do you think the challenges might be?
Okay, what I think is attractive about the position for someone who is ready to move to the Cayman Islands is that part of it is where the college can go from here. But there's areas too that if a person is not aware of, is that the workforce in the Cayman Islands is only so big. And so what I wrestle with as president, and I'm sure the next president of UCCI would wrestle with, is that after you graduate so many people inside of a program, where do they get the jobs? And will that program hold up throughout the years? Now, because the Cayman Islands is a business island, I'll just put it in context there. You know, we have tourism, you know, but it's kind of like all of these other areas that you would like to get going. Will the workforce sustain that enough positions that somebody who goes and gets their degree in that training, will there be jobs? You know, the labor force survey shows a certain percent of people who feel that and of course you can only go on who's being surveyed, the households, the number, is that there's a certain percent that is underemployed, meaning that there's not enough jobs for their career that they're in. So they leave the island, go work globally, or you know, there's certainly that. But I think that one of the appealing things to me about you know, being able to work at UCCI is that it's almost at a place where there's a lot of good things going on, and it certainly has the potential to be a drawing agent, you know, within the Caribbean, you know, for studying. If the government would back the college with the funding that it needs, and I know COVID has brought, you know, a lot of restrictions on what can be and can't, because a lot of the employment within the island has suffered a big blow, you know, and people as a whole, you know, are trying to make decisions about what do they do, you know. So, but the holdback to me, also in the same breath, is that is how do you take the college as a whole and steer it in a direction that's going to create growth, because there's only a small piece of the population that's going to college, you know. And would a lot of people like to go to college? Yes, at every age level. I know at ICCI, the majority of our population, of our student population, is in the workforce already, and they come and they enhance their skills and their diplomas and degrees, so they can be competitive in the job market for those jobs that do open up. And so they're not there to come for all daytime classes, you know, so our classes are at nighttime. So for somebody who would really want to elevate their game, I think UCCI would be a great place if you like the challenge, you know, of being on a small island with a small sector of population, and garnering. I believe you're going to have to go off island to really get to raise the funds that we look at as raising, that will make it a difference, because even as it is, the government can only do so much, because they got so many areas that they're housing right now. So to me, I think it would be, if you were I'm 71. I don't mind telling my age, you know. I'm one of the old people, you know. But if there was somebody who was really up to the challenge of stepping into a new environment, a new culture, and a new opportunity that that UCCI has, I just think it's in a lovely location, you know, to be able to do that. But also, when I came to ICCI, I looked into the economy of the islands, and everything was going well at the time I came in, you know, and the cost of living was high. And so, you know, you had to be willing to absorb, you know, a lot of the ancillary things that's in the background, you know, around it. But I think UCCI has some good things, and they need to. I guess now is the time to sit down and ask yourself, you know, where are we going from here? What does the job market look like? And the programs that we have, what's working, what isn't working, what do we need to change? Do we need to change anything? And I think the person that is considering whenever the job is posted, etc., you know, I think they would need to do their own background work, because they are coming from an area maybe over in the States, or wherever they come from globally, and it's going to be different. It's just a different stage, a different arena inside the whole theater of higher ed.
And Tom, thoughts on you know, strength of, you know, attractiveness and challenges of the position. I can't hear you. I don't know if you're on mute.
Yeah, I think one of the big changes that we made in the job description was to make the president externally focused. That sort of describes a bunch of things the president needs to do. Fundraising, obviously, but going out and working out partnerships with employers, getting internships and all that. And so that idea of the president spending most of the time off campus, well, maybe not most of the time, but much more time than Roy Bladen did. I remember when we showed the job description to Roy Bladen, he said, I would apply for this job. That's, you know, I don't do that kind of stuff, asking people for money and so on. So, so that was, I would hope that they would continue to have that as part of the job description, that it's an external focus. If you're not out there talking to employers, you don't know what the needs are, right? We learned a lot doing that. Employers are saying, well, Patrick, you were one of them. Say, look, I'm happy to teach someone my business, but they've got to come with basic English, math, communication skills, show up on time. I mean, basic life skills that, you know, a general university education can provide them. And UCCI, you know, as Byron said, it has to throw off the industrial model where you've got a factory of 20 students in a program. You know, you can't keep producing 20 students in the same program year after year and expect them to get employed on it. So the focus is away from programs, being more employer-focused, student-focused, and the only way you can do that is by having the president more involved in the outside. And so that the programs evolve with the needs of the various stakeholders, as opposed to the needs of faculty members who want to offer a program because that's their field of study, right? I mean, it's a big shift in a university to move to that. And that's one thing that we did with the new job description with the hire of Stacey McAfee. That shift happened, and I hope that external focus would continue.
Yeah, and I'll say just a note on generally when you're looking for Caymanians, you know, always Caymanians first for open positions. But one of the downsides that Caymanians might have that overseas candidates don't is you're in your hometown, and a position like university president or say publisher of a newspaper or even a journalist in my experience is their public facing positions, and Caymanians will already be keenly aware of the very distinct brand of politics and personal politics and personalities that do go on. So, you know, speaking hypothetically, I think that would be one of the biggest challenges to getting a local applicant or candidate for the position, is because it is a very public position. And, you know, and if you're a local person stepping into that, you can attract more and different kinds of scrutiny than if you're, you know, somebody coming from overseas. That's just in my experience.
Yeah, I think
what I found.
with one small caveat. When we did the search, we looked at, there are Caymanians who had academic positions in universities in the United States, and we looked at the idea of proactively going after someone who would be both suitable in terms of academic experience and also be Caymanian. So that's, you have to separate sometimes the local from the Caymanian aspect to it.
Right. And I think April's been WhatsApping me. She is here, I promise you. And she says we need to wrap up pretty soon because she needs to use the channel for something. She's doing something unimportant like a high school graduation streaming. Not as great as our weekly episode. But yeah, any final thoughts on what we've been talking about?
Well, I think it's time now that I've been in the Cayman Islands 4 years, you know, and COVID has changed a lot, and it could continue. I think we just really need to learn how to live with it because it's going to be around for a while, and I think that you know, that there needs to be some focus on how we do wellness checks with students and stuff. I know we do that at ICCI to find out how are you doing, and I even get on phones and I call, and the students say, "Wow, Dr. Coon, the president of the university called me to find out how I was doing." Now I know that's a much larger playing field over there, but I think that that the candidate that comes in over there, the next president, really needs to be a hands-on type person, and it probably has been all along. But I'm to continue being a hands-on person with the students because I think oftentimes leaders feel like their position is in their office or in the larger context of running the university, and it's really the students who we work for, you know, and so keeping a real close connection and networking with the student body as much as possible, I think is really very important for the next person to come who comes on board. And I think to have that chemistry within the mix of everything is that how available are you? How you know, how much do you flow with the student body, and how much do you know is going on within the student body? I think is also important for the next president, because students want to know, and so do the faculty and the staff, that the person cares. And I think that's important, and that's a big mandate to put on somebody with all the other job responsibilities that they have to have, you know. So I think having a well-balanced skill set would be very important.
Yeah, and I think for me the phrase is like student-centered, and I hear that a lot from the most successful institutions on the island, going from preschools all the way up through secondary and tertiary. It seems to be something that the strongest leaders keep in mind, is that idea of being student-centered. Tom, any final thoughts?
Yes, just one thing the search committee board need to resolve is the term of appointment. You cannot hire someone for 3 years to execute a 5-year plan. President Byron served 9 years under multiple employment contracts. I was on the board when he was renewed for his last contract, and he didn't have to run for the job each time. And what's happened is, as UCCI has come under the Public Authorities Act, every job has to be posted again to give the Caymanian a chance to get it. Mm-hmm. And so that's what tripped up this process. They couldn't simply renew Dr. McAfee the same way they renewed President Byron. They have to post it, and it's not a great process. So they've got to resolve either that issue or issue the 5-year contract from the ESSET.
Great. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming on and talking about this. And once again, I'm Patrick Brendel with the Cayman Current, and we have Byron Coon, president of ICCI, and Tom Simpson, who is on the UCCI board of directors. And on behalf of April Cummings of Life TV, Cayman Life TV, that's been this week's episode of EDBEAT. And thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching, everybody. Have a good day.